Imagine a girl in 1871 who whispered things no one should ever know, things about death, betrayal, and events that had not yet happened. Picture yourself in a candle-lit room, shadows dancing along the cracked wooden walls as her fragile voice breaks the silence. Her words are not loud, not forceful, but they carry the weight of something otherworldly, something dangerous. What would you do if you heard a child, no older than 10, murmur the exact thoughts you had hidden deep inside your mind, secrets you had never spoken aloud? Would you call her a miracle or a monster? The year was 1871, a time when superstition still ruled over reason, when people believed in curses, hexes, and whispers of the unseen. The world was dark, uncertain, plagued by famine and war, and in the midst of it all, a girl named Violet Mueller was born. Few people remember her name now, but in her lifetime, it was spoken in hushed tones, as if saying it too loudly might summon her shadow. The story of Violet is not written in history books. You won't find her in official records or polite conversations. She exists only in fragments, scattered diary entries, faded letters, and the whispers of villagers who swore they encountered her. And yet, her story has survived for over a century, passed down like a warning, like a ghost that refuses to rest. When we speak of Violet Mueller, we speak of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the truth, fear of the very secrets we bury in the dark corners of our souls. Because Violet did not just know things, she revealed them. She spoke the hidden, the forbidden, and the unbearable. And each time she did, she left behind shattered lives and trembling hearts. Her voice was delicate, almost melodic, but her words were razor-sharp. They sliced through the lies of men, tore open the hidden betrayals of women, and uncovered tragedies that no one dared confront. Some believed she was a prophet, cursed with a gift too heavy for her young shoulders. Others whispered she was possessed, a vessel for darker forces that fed on pain and fear. But one thing is certain, Violet Mueller was not ordinary. She could not be ignored. She was a mirror, reflecting the shadows people tried to hide, and no matter how much they despised her, they could not silence her. Tonight, we step into her world. A world of flickering lanterns, cobblestone streets slick with rain, and eyes that watch from behind shuttered windows. We will walk through the forgotten town where she lived, breathe the fear that surrounded her, and listen, just as those villagers did, to the secrets she was never meant to speak. But be warned. Once you hear Violet's story, it may follow you. Her whispers may echo in your mind when you're alone at night. They may remind you of your own buried truths, the ones you swore you would never reveal. So lean closer. Let the shadows wrap around you. Listen to the silence between your heartbeats. Because Violet Mueller's story is not just history, it is a haunting that refuses to die. What secrets did Violet reveal, and why were people terrified of her? The story of Violet Mueller begins not in the grand halls of palaces or the bustling avenues of famous cities, but in a town so small and forgotten that maps of the time often left it unnamed. Tucked deep within the folds of Europe's countryside, the village was a cluster of crooked houses huddled together against the wind, as though they too were afraid of being left alone in the dark. Imagine cobblestone streets that never seemed to dry, no matter how long the sun lingered. Wooden shutters creaked on rusted hinges, banging in the night whenever the wind turned sharp. The scent of smoke clung permanently to the air, rising from chimneys that rarely went cold, for the winters were merciless, and the summers were little more than a whisper. In every corner of the town you could sense a weight, an invisible heaviness that pressed down on its people, making them walk with lowered heads and wary eyes. It was 1871, a year history remembers for upheavals and wars, but for this village it was a year of survival. Europe had seen famine. Disease spread quickly through villages with little access to doctors or clean water. Superstition was not just belief, it was protection. People clung to charms, amulets, and whispered prayers, believing that evil walked beside them, waiting for a chance to strike. To be different in such a place was to be dangerous. Children were expected to be silent, obedient, and unremarkable. They were not encouraged to ask questions or to speak out of turn. A child who laughed too loudly was scolded. A child who cried too much was suspected of attracting spirits. And a child who spoke things that no one should know, well, that was an omen. That was a threat. The villagers lived in constant tension with the unseen. An owl's cry at night could mean death was near. A broken mirror meant years of misfortune. If a storm arrived on a Sunday, some swore it was God's punishment for unconfessed sins. These beliefs were not mere stories to them. They were survival codes, rules etched deep into the bones of the community. To question them was to invite disaster. It was in this crucible of fear and faith that Violet Mueller entered the world. The night she was born is still spoken of in fragments, pieced together from fading journals and whispered accounts. It was said that the wind howled louder than it had in years, rattling windows until glass shattered onto cobblestones below. The church bell rang, though no one had pulled its rope. Some villagers claimed the river that wound past the town swelled suddenly, as though stirred by an unseen hand, flooding its banks for just a single night before retreating in silence. Her birth was not greeted with joy, but with unease. A child born under such signs could not be ordinary. The midwife, a woman seasoned by decades of delivering babies, was said to have crossed herself 3 times as she handed Violet to her mother. Neighbors, peering through thin curtains at the flickering candlelight, whispered that the child's arrival was marked by omens too powerful to ignore. The Mueller family, though respected, carried the weight of those whispers immediately. Her father was a craftsman, known for his skill with wood, while her mother kept the home with quiet dignity. But no skill or reputation could shield them from suspicion. From the moment Violet opened her eyes, the village seemed to mark her as different, set apart, though no one could explain why. As the years passed, the town did not forget the strange night of her birth. Each time the wind rattled too violently, or the church bell echoed without reason, people muttered her name. She was only a child, but already she was tethered to fear, bound to stories of curses and signs, and yet in those earliest days, Violet was quiet. Too quiet. She did not babble as infants usually did. She watched, her eyes fixed on things no one else could see, her gaze following shadows on the wall as though they whispered to her. Some mothers turned their children away from her carriage in the street, believing even a glance might invite misfortune. Her presence was a reminder that this was not just any child. She was born beneath omens, into a world where superstition was stronger than reason. And whether by coincidence or something darker, strange events seemed to follow her, small at first, but enough to keep the villagers restless, always watching. In that forgotten town, 1871 would not be remembered for the wars echoing across Europe. It would be remembered for the birth of a girl who should not have known the things she did. Violet Mueller's story had begun, and the world around her was already bracing for the secrets she would one day reveal. Violet Mueller grew into childhood like a shadow stretching across the village, always present, always noticed, but never fully understood. From the moment she began to speak, it was clear she was not like other children. While most learned words slowly stumbling over syllables and giggling at their own mistakes, Violet's voice carried an odd precision. She spoke softly, almost in a whisper, as though her words weren't entirely her own, as if they had been given to her from someplace else. Her parents at first clung to the hope that she was simply gifted. Her father liked to believe she was clever beyond her years, perhaps even blessed with a sharp mind. But unease stirred in the household when Violet began to say things no child could possibly know. One of the earliest incidents happened when she was no older than 5. A neighbor had come to visit, a woman cheerful in appearance but troubled in her heart. As the adult spoke, Violet tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "She still cries when no one can hear. She misses the baby." The neighbor froze, color draining from her face. She had lost a child in silence, in shame, and had never spoken of it to anyone outside her closest kin. Her eyes filled with tears as she rushed out of the house, leaving behind a stunned silence that lingered for hours. It was not the last time such a thing occurred. Violet's words began to carry truths hidden in the hearts of those around her. She would mention arguments between husbands and wives that had never left their bedrooms, She would mutter about coins secretly buried in gardens, letters tucked beneath loose floorboards, promises broken long before she was even born. Each revelation left her parents more unsettled, caught between pride and fear. Her mother grew protective, insisting that Violet was only a child, her words misunderstood. But her father, quiet and brooding, sometimes avoided his daughter's gaze, as though he feared what she might one day say about him. At night, when Violet spoke in her sleep, they would stand outside her door listening to the fragments of words, sometimes prayers, sometimes confessions, sometimes names of people long dead. The villagers, of course, noticed. Children, ever perceptive, began avoiding Violet in the lanes. They whispered that she could see into your soul, that she might tell everyone your darkest thoughts if you got too close. Mothers pulled their little ones aside, warning them not to play with the Mueller girl. There was one incident that truly sealed Violet's reputation among the townsfolk. A farmer had collapsed in the fields, taken by sudden illness. As villagers rushed to help, Violet stood quietly at the edge of the crowd and whispered, "The sickness is in his chest. He will not rise again." Hours later, the farmer was dead, his lungs choked with fever. The villagers turned to Violet wide-eyed, and though no one spoke aloud, the truth settled heavily among them. This was no ordinary child. Some claimed she was blessed with sight, that God had chosen her to reveal hidden truths. Others, darker in their whispers, said she was cursed, a vessel for demons. And in a time when superstition ruled stronger than reason, such talk was dangerous. Her parents struggled in silence. They loved her, but they could not deny the fear that followed her like a shadow. At home, her mother wept quietly, asking God why her child was different. Her father, though stern, never raised his hand against Violet, yet there were nights when he drank more than usual, as though drowning his unease in ale. Violet herself seemed unaware of the growing storm around her. She did not laugh like other children, nor did she run through the fields or chase after games. Instead, she sat alone for hours, her hands folded in her lap, watching the world with eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. Sometimes she would speak without prompting, her words drifting like smoke into the air, carrying truths no one wanted to hear. The village began to murmur, "The cursed child, the witch's daughter, the girl who knows too much." And though she was still young, Violet was already learning that her words could wound. That knowledge was a burden she could not put down. Her life was only just beginning. But the seeds of fear had already taken root. The townspeople would not forget the little girl who spoke secrets no one should know. And soon, those whispers would grow into something far more dangerous. As Violet grew older, her whispers became impossible to dismiss as coincidence or childish imagination. What had once been strange murmurs in passing began to take on weight, substance, and undeniable truth. She no longer revealed just fragments of grief or sadness. Now she uncovered secrets that people had buried deep in their hearts, things that even their closest family would never have known. It began with small incidents, the kind that left people shaken but uncertain. A man passing her in the street froze when Violet, without even looking at him, muttered, "You still keep the ring hidden in your boot?" His face went pale. The very same morning, he had placed a stolen gold ring in the lining of his boot, a secret crime no one had suspected. The man never spoke of the incident, but from that day forward, he refused to walk down the same road as her. Another time, Violet startled an elderly woman in the marketplace. As the woman inspected apples, Violet said softly, "You never forgave your sister for what she did, and she died without hearing your forgiveness." The woman's hand trembled so violently that the apple rolled from her palm and cracked against the stones. She left the market in tears, whispering prayers under her breath. Soon, stories of these strange encounters spread like wildfire. People began to avoid her entirely. Mothers pulled their children inside when they saw her approach. Farmers crossed themselves as she walked past their fields. Even the priest hesitated when she came too close, though he would never admit it aloud. And yet, curiosity was a powerful force. Some came to her in secret, desperate to know what she might reveal. One man, plagued by guilt over an affair, confronted her in the quiet of night, asking, "Does my wife know?" Violet, eyes calm and voice steady, replied, "She knew before you even touched her. She carries that secret like a blade in her heart." The man stumbled backward, his face stricken with horror, as if she had not only spoken the truth, but had reached into his very soul to tear it out. There were darker tales, too. It was said that Violet once told a grieving mother where to find the body of her missing son, describing the very hollow in the forest where he had fallen. When the body was discovered, just as Violet had said, the mother wept with both relief and fear. Gratitude was swallowed by dread, because how could a girl who had never left the village know such things? Another whispered story told of Violet revealing a crime before it had even been discovered. A merchant, wealthy and respected, had long concealed a scandalous truth. He had swindled his own brother out of inheritance. Violet spoke it aloud in front of others, her voice quiet but firm. "You took what was not yours, and you buried the papers beneath the floor." That very night, men broke into the merchant's home and uncovered documents hidden beneath rotting wood, proof of his betrayal. His reputation was ruined. From that day, his family never spoke her name again. These events were not isolated. They multiplied, each story more unsettling than the last, until Violet was no longer simply a child with strange words. She was a presence that unsettled the entire village. People began to believe that merely being near her was dangerous, that her eyes could strip them bare, that her whispers could unravel their lives. To the villagers, Violet was no longer Violet Mueller, the daughter of a craftsman. She was something else, something unexplainable, perhaps unnatural. Some believed she was touched by God. Others whispered she was marked by the devil. Both explanations carried fear, and fear was a dangerous thing in a place where superstition ruled stronger than truth. And what of Violet herself? She never laughed at her revelations, never seemed to enjoy the chaos they caused. She spoke as though burdened, her tone calm, almost detached, as if she did not choose the words but simply delivered them. When asked how she knew, she often shook her head, her eyes distant. "The words come to me," she would say softly. "I don't ask for them." But whether she asked or not, the whispers continued, unstoppable. And with every secret revealed, with every life shaken to its core, the villagers' unease deepened. Whispers of fear grew louder in the tavern at night. Men muttered that no one should have such knowledge. Women confessed in private that they dreaded what Violet might say about them. And so, fear began to twist into something darker. The town could no longer ignore Violet Mueller. She was not simply the child marked by strange omens at birth. She had become a living threat to the fragile order of their lives, a mirror they did not wish to look into. The girl who spoke secrets no one should know was no longer just a curiosity. She was becoming a danger. The whispers of Violet Mueller had unsettled the village for years, but there came a time when unease could no longer remain as simple fear. Fear, when left to fester, becomes something else: hatred, anger, and the need to destroy what cannot be understood. That time came sooner than anyone expected, and it began with one man. The merchant, a wealthy figure whose reputation had already been cracked by Violet's revelations, became the center of a storm. For months he had tried to rebuild his name, walking proudly through the streets as though her words had meant nothing. But pride is fragile, and secrets, even when exposed, do not stop festering. One evening, in front of half the town, Violet crossed his path. She stopped, her eyes fixed on him with the same unsettling stillness she always carried. Then, in a voice quiet enough to sound almost like a confession, she whispered, "You still keep the letter she wrote to you, hidden in your desk. The one that proves your betrayal." The crowd around them fell silent. The man's face blanched, his chest heaving as though he had been struck. The truth of her words was undeniable. He had indeed hidden a letter from his late wife, a letter that revealed his disloyalty and his deceit. The shame that filled the street was unbearable. His neighbors, his colleagues, even his servants, all of them now knew. In his fury, he lunged forward, raising his hand against the girl. But Violet did not flinch. She only looked at him with those wide, steady eyes, and something in that calm gaze made him recoil in terror. From that night, the village's fear turned to rage. Whispers in the tavern became accusations. She ruins lives, they muttered. She shames us before God. No child should have such power. Others claimed she was not a child at all, but a vessel for something darker, a shadow wearing the shape of a girl. Her parents pleaded with the community for understanding. Her mother wept openly in the marketplace, insisting Violet was innocent, that she never meant to harm anyone. Her father, proud yet broken, argued that a gift from God should not be feared. But the voices of the villagers grew louder, drowning them out. For every parent who pitied her, there were 3 who wanted her gone. The church, too, began to intervene. The priest, who once only kept his distance, now stood in the pulpit on Sundays, warning of dangers that lurked within the community. He spoke of temptation, of false prophets, of demons who crept into the lives of the unsuspecting. Though he never said her name, everyone knew whom he meant. The turning point came with tragedy. A young boy went missing near the river, and though his body was later found, lifeless in the current, the whispers turned immediately toward Violet. She knew, people said. She could have stopped it. Others claimed she had foreseen the boy's death and said nothing. Some, more superstitious, believed she had caused it with her words. Grief and fear together made for a dangerous poison. From that day on, the town's patience ended. Doors slammed shut when she passed. Children screamed at the sight of her. Men muttered threats under their breath, their hands clenching into fists. Violet's very existence had become unbearable to them, and Violet, still so young, began to understand. She no longer spoke freely. She no longer whispered the truths that came to her. Instead, she grew quiet, her lips trembling as if each word might betray her. But silence could not save her. Even when she said nothing, people accused her of knowing too much, of hiding what she could reveal at any moment. She had become a danger not because of what she said, but because of what she might say. The villagers wanted peace, and in their eyes, peace could only come with her silence, permanent silence. By the end of that summer, the whispers had grown into chants, muttered prayers and threats of justice. The church bell rang often, and each time it did, people spoke of her as though she were already condemned. The town that once only feared Violet Mueller now hungered to destroy her. The air grew heavy with doom, and the girl who had been marked by strange omens at birth was now trapped in a storm of hatred. There was no escape, only the slow, inevitable march toward a reckoning that even Violet herself seemed to sense. They had demanded her silence, but silence was never meant for Violet Mueller. The more she tried to swallow her words, the more violently they clawed their way out, like caged birds desperate for freedom. At night, she began to speak in her sleep, her small voice drifting through the walls of her family's cottage like a spectral hymn. Her parents would wake, trembling to hear her whispering things she could not have known. One night, her mother heard her murmur, "The fire will take the stables first, then the wheat, and then the roof." The very next evening, a lantern fell in the fields, and flames devoured the land exactly as Violet had described. Another time her father jolted awake as she muttered, "He will not return from the road. His horse will come back alone." Days later, a traveler from their village was found lifeless on the roadside, his horse wandering into town without him. These were not mere secrets anymore, they were warnings. Prophecies that laced terror into the marrow of every villager who heard them. Some said she was cursed by the devil himself, that her tongue had been branded by hell to speak destruction into being. Others whispered that she was a messenger, a grim angel sent to punish their sins. The priest, hearing these stories, spoke with a trembling conviction from the pulpit. "Beware the girl whose tongue weaves the threads of fate. The Lord's mysteries are not hers to command. If these words are not stopped, they will summon only ruin upon us all." It was enough to turn the fearful into fanatics. Mothers clutched their children tighter when Violet walked past. Farmers spat in the dirt at the sight of her. Men gathered at taverns late into the night, their voices heavy with ale and anger. "If she speaks of death again, it will be on her hands," they growled. Yet Violet herself did not seem to wield her gift as a weapon. She looked more fragile now, her pale face hollowed by sleepless nights, her eyes shadowed, as though she carried the weight of every word she uttered. Sometimes she cried after her prophecies, begging her parents to make them stop, as though the words were fire burning her lips. But her parents could do nothing. The strangest part was that Violet often appeared haunted by what she knew. On several occasions, she ran through the village square, desperate to warn someone, only to be met with slammed doors and furious shouts. "Stay away, witch!" they hissed. But every time they ignored her, every time they cast her out, the prophecy came true. One winter's morning, she stood barefoot in the snow outside the church, her breath coming in visible clouds of desperation. She called out to the priest before the congregation, "The steeple bell will fall before sundown. Someone will be crushed." The people laughed at her, hissed at her, some even threw stones to drive her away. But as dusk fell and the last rays of light cut across the churchyard, the old bell rope snapped. The massive iron bell plummeted, shattering wood and stone, narrowly missing the priest himself, who stood frozen in terror. It was then that even the strongest skeptics fell silent. From that day forward, no one dared dismiss Violet's words. But the truth brought no safety. Instead, her prophecies became a curse heavier than before. Now, every time she spoke, people trembled not because they doubted her, but because they believed. And belief was far more dangerous. The villagers grew desperate. They lived in constant dread, waiting for her next whisper, her next haunting glimpse of what tomorrow would bring. No one wanted to hear her words, yet everyone feared what silence might conceal. She had become both the town's omen and its executioner, a child whose very breath carried doom, and in that fear, a new question began to spread like poison. If Violet Mueller could foretell disaster, was she merely seeing it? Or was she causing it? The whispers had grown louder than church bells, heavier than winter winds. By now, Violet Mueller was no longer a child in the villagers' eyes. She was a curse that walked among them, a blight that poisoned their peace. Fear had fermented into something darker. Hatred. It began with small acts of cruelty. A stone hurled at her when she passed through the square. A bucket of water tossed upon her as she walked to the well. Doors slammed, shutters bolted, prayers muttered against her shadow. Children who once played with her now hid behind their mothers, clutching their hands as though Violet's very gaze might damn them. But the fear reached its breaking point when one of her prophecies struck too close to the heart of power. Violet had warned of the wealthy merchant, Herr Fischer, whispering one night that his fortune was not clean, that he had stolen from the desperate during famine. At first, the villagers dismissed her, too terrified to challenge the man who employed half the town. But when his ledgers were discovered, hidden beneath floorboards, proving his crimes, his reputation crumbled. His wrath was immediate and merciless. Standing in the tavern before a crowd of trembling men, he spat the words that sealed Violet's fate. "She is no child. She is a devil's mouthpiece, and if we do not silence her, she will destroy us all." The next day, the church bells tolled not for worship, but for judgment. The townspeople dragged Violet to the square, her small frame shivering in the icy wind. Torches flickered against the night, their flames casting long, jagged shadows across the cobblestones. The priest stood at the center, his hands trembling as he raised the holy book. His eyes betrayed something more than faith, fear. He too had seen her words come true, and he could not decide if she was a vessel of God or his enemy. The crowd roared their accusations. "Witch! Demon child! Burn her!" Violet's parents fought their way through the mob, begging for mercy, their cries drowned by the fever of hatred. Her mother clutched her, weeping, while her father shouted until his voice broke, "She is just a girl." But Violet stood unnervingly still. Her eyes, wide and glistening, scanned the crowd as if she already knew what was coming. She whispered softly, so softly only those nearest could hear, "You are all afraid. Not of me, but of yourselves." The trial was no trial at all. The priest read verses of condemnation, his voice shaking with each word. Witnesses shouted their stories, secrets she had revealed, deaths she had predicted, curses they swore she had spoken into existence. Herr Fischer, puffed with rage, declared that Violet was in league with Satan. And then came the sentence. A hush fell across the mob as the priest declared, "If she is of God, let him deliver her. If she is of the devil, let her burn." The mob erupted in cheers and shrieks. Violet's parents collapsed, begging, clawing at the earth in desperation. Violet herself did not scream. She did not beg. She only lifted her gaze to the church steeple, her lips moving in a whisper no one could hear. The torches drew closer. The wood was gathered. The air reeked of pitch and smoke. But before the flames could touch her, the night itself seemed to tremble. A gust of wind howled through the square, extinguishing half the torches in a single breath. The crowd gasped, stumbling back as if the devil himself had passed among them. And in that chaos, in that single shattering moment, Violet Mueller vanished. Some swore they saw dark figures cloaked in shadow seize her and pull her into the night. Others swore the ground opened and swallowed her whole. Her mother screamed her name until her voice gave out. But when the smoke cleared and the mob regained its senses, Violet was gone. No body, no grave, no trace, only silence. When the torches sputtered out and the mob's fury broke against the wind, Violet Mueller was gone. The villagers searched the square, the alleys, the forest's edge, but it was as if the night itself had swallowed her. From that moment on, her story slipped from truth into legend, her fate retold in whispers, each version darker than the last. Some claimed she was taken by angels, spirits cloaked in white light who descended to protect her from mortal hands. These believers insisted she had been chosen by God, her gift misunderstood, her suffering a test. To them, her disappearance was a divine rescue, a proof that she was never meant to burn. But others swore the devil himself had come to collect what was his. They spoke of a shadowy figure seen at the edge of the square, tall and unearthly, with eyes that glowed like embers. They said he smiled as the mob screamed, and when the wind howled, he carried Violet away into eternal darkness. For years afterward, whenever storms rolled across the village, people claimed they heard her voice carried on the thunder. There were those who believed she had simply escaped, that in the chaos, her parents, or perhaps sympathetic villagers, spirited her away through hidden passages beneath the church. Some even whispered she fled into the Black Forest, where strange lights and sounds were often reported. Travelers claimed to have seen her wandering the woods in a white dress, barefoot, her eyes empty yet knowing. Yet another tale told of men, in dark robes, strangers who had long watched the village from afar. They were said to be seekers of forbidden knowledge, collectors of the unnatural. According to rumor, they had taken Violet that night, whisking her away to some hidden place where her whispers could be studied or silenced forever. But the most chilling story was also the simplest. Some whispered that she never left the square at all, that she had dissolved into the air itself, vanishing like smoke, and that, perhaps, she had never been human to begin with. What made these legends more terrifying was the silence that followed. No grave was ever found, no body, no relic of clothing or bone. Her parents, broken by loss, faded into obscurity, moving away, or perhaps dying quietly in grief. The priest never spoke of that night again, though those who saw him afterward swore he was haunted, his sermons trembling with guilt. Herr Fischer, the man who had condemned her most fiercely, died within the year. His body discovered twisted and contorted as if frozen mid-scream. The absence of proof became its own kind of proof. Violet's disappearance wasn't an ending, it was an opening. An open wound in the memory of the town. Children grew up hearing her name whispered as a warning. Lovers dared each other to walk the square at night, listening for her voice. And travelers who passed through swore the village carried an air of unease, as though its streets were still waiting for the girl who had vanished into the dark. To this day, no historian has found a record of her trial in official ledgers. No documentation exists beyond scattered diary entries, faded parish notes, and the murmurs of folklore. Was Violet Mueller real? Or was she a story born of hysteria? An invention to explain tragedy, superstition and fear? No one can say for certain. But in that uncertainty, her legend thrives, and perhaps that is more frightening than any single truth. For it means Violet Mueller is not bound by the past. She lives in every whisper, every shadow, every secret we hope never escapes the dark. Even after Violet Mueller vanished into the night, her presence never truly left the village. In fact, it seemed her absence was more terrifying than her whispers had ever been. For the people who had once condemned her, silence became its own kind of haunting. It began with voices, soft, almost imperceptible, drifting through the air when the streets were empty. A farmer swore he heard a child's voice calling his name while he worked alone in the fields. A woman claimed she woke in the night to hear a whisper at her bedside. "I know what you've done." Some dismissed these as dreams, tricks of exhaustion, but the whispers grew more frequent, more intimate. They always sounded like Violet. Then came the secrets. Diaries from the time record strange confessions, as if guilt itself had become unbearable. Men admitted to thefts long buried, women confessed to betrayals they had sworn to the grave. It was as though Violet's absence forced their sins to the surface, her spirit still peeling back the veil of silence. One villager wrote, "Even without her, we cannot hide. It is as if she still walks among us, unseen, pulling our secrets from our throats." Children who had never met her spoke of seeing the pale girl by the well, or standing near the church steps after sundown. They described her with uncanny accuracy: barefoot, white dress, long hair falling in tangled strands. Parents hushed them, terrified to acknowledge that Violet had not been forgotten, not even by the innocent. And the town itself seemed cursed. Fires broke out without warning, crops failed, livestock perished. Some said these disasters were nothing more than bad fortune, but others whispered they were Violet's vengeance. The priest who had condemned her died suddenly in his sleep, his face twisted as though he had seen something unspeakable. Herr Fischer, already disgraced, was found frozen in his home, his body rigid, eyes wide in horror. His servants swore. They heard him arguing with a child's voice in the hours before his death. Travelers passing through wrote of the unease that clung to the streets, of how the villagers avoided speaking Violet's name aloud. It was as if she had become a forbidden word, a curse in itself. Yet the silence only made her memory stronger. Letters from decades later show that even as the century turned, Violet Mueller's story lived on. A visiting scholar noted in 1903, "The people here believe in a girl who never died. They say she still whispers their truths in the dark. They call her the girl who knew too much." Over time, her legend twisted into cautionary tales told to children. Behave, or Violet will find you. But beneath the nursery warnings, fear still lingered among the elders who had been alive in 1871. They knew the whispers were real. They had heard them themselves. Some even believed the entire village was marked, that Violet's spirit had bound itself to the place. Anyone who tried to leave would be drawn back, or suffer some misfortune on the road. Diaries record families who fled, only to perish in accidents or disasters far from home. Survivors always returned, whispering, "We cannot escape her." To this day, the ruins of that forgotten village are said to be haunted. Locals from nearby towns avoid the place after dusk. Those who dare to visit at night claim to hear the same chilling phrase echoing from the shadows. "I know your secret." Perhaps Violet Mueller was not a monster, nor a witch, nor a child of the devil. Perhaps she was something far more terrifying, something human. A girl burdened with the unbearable weight of truth, a mirror held up to the darkest corners of those around her. Her story is not written in books, nor carved into stone. It lingers only in whispers, in fragments of memory, in the fear of secrets that refused to stay buried. Maybe she did not vanish that night at all. Maybe Violet has never left us. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine her voice, faint but close, as though leaning toward your ear. What would she say? What truth would she pull from you, the one you hide even from yourself? Would you listen, or would you run? Because if Violet Mueller still walks among us, if her whispers still drift through time, then perhaps she is watching now, and perhaps she knows your secret too. If this story sent chills down your spine, remember, you're not alone in the dark. Like this video, share it with those brave enough to hear the tale, and subscribe for more haunting stories lost in history. Until next time, listen closely. The shadows always have something to say. The night grows still, and yet the echoes of Violet Mueller have not faded. Her story, if we dare call it only a story, does not end in the cobblestone square where her trial was staged, nor in the shadows where she disappeared. No, it lingers, like smoke curling through the rafters of time, like a voice carried endlessly on the wind. Imagine her now. A child with hollow eyes, a white dress stained by dirt and tears, lips trembling as if words still struggled to escape. Imagine her stepping out from the veil of history and standing in the very room where you sit. Would you dare look into her face, knowing she could speak the one truth you've hidden all your life? That is the terror of Violet Mueller. She is not simply a tale of the past. She is the embodiment of what we fear most, that our secrets are not safe, that the lies we whisper to ourselves can be dragged into the light. And in that way, Violet is not a ghost, nor a witch, nor a cursed child. She is a mirror. Think of the villagers all those years ago in 1871. They condemned her not because she was wicked, but because she was honest. Brutally, impossibly honest. Her tongue tore open the fabric of their facades and revealed the rot beneath. They could not bear to face themselves, so they turned their rage upon her. Does that sound unfamiliar? Or does it sound like something we still do, even now? If you peel back the layers of superstition and fear, you find something disturbingly human at the core of Violet's tale. She is the scapegoat, the vessel of projection, the child sacrificed so a community could preserve its fragile illusions. And yet, despite their attempts to erase her, she persists. That is why her story survived. That is why her whispers still crawl across generations. What does that tell us? Perhaps that we never truly escape the weight of what we hide. Perhaps that truth, once spoken, cannot be destroyed. It becomes something else, something immortal. Now imagine this. Her whispers are not bound to that ruined village, not bound to the past at all. What if she is still here, drifting through time, listening, waiting? What if even now her voice could curl into your ear and murmur what you pray no one ever discovers? Pause. Listen, did you hear it? The faintest breath at the edge of silence. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was Violet. The villagers tried to bury her. They failed. You may try to dismiss her as folklore, a fabrication of frightened minds. But the fear you feel now, listening to her tale, that is real. The shiver across your skin, the way you glance at the shadows in your room, the way you wonder if someone is standing just behind you, that is real. She lives in those moments. She thrives in them. And here is the final whisper. Maybe Violet Mueller never wanted to curse anyone. Maybe she wanted only to free them from lies, from guilt, from the heavy chains of silence. But people do not thank the hand that rips away the veil. They curse it. They destroy it. Or at least, they try, yet destruction never truly came for Violet. She slipped away, beyond fire, beyond judgment, into the dark. And what waits in the dark cannot always be controlled. It can only wait and whisper. So ask yourself right now, what if she could stand beside you in this very moment? What if she leaned close and spoke the secret you have never shared, the truth you've hidden, even from yourself? Would you listen, or would you run? Because Violet Mueller is more than a ghost story. She is a reminder, a warning, a reflection. She is the echo of everything we bury, everything we fear to reveal. And she is patient. She has been waiting since 1871. She will keep waiting, and if you dare to speak her name aloud tonight, perhaps she will find you. Perhaps she already has. If this tale has sent a chill down your spine, if it made you question what truths hide in your own shadows, then let her story linger with you. Let it remind you that the past is never truly gone, that whispers never truly fade. And if you crave more stories like this, tales of history's forgotten phantoms, of secrets buried but never silenced, then stay with us. Like this story. Share it with those who think they are safe from the whispers. And subscribe, if you're brave enough to keep listening, for Violet is not the only one. And the next whisper may not come from the past. It may come from you. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. Not to me, not to the world outside your window, but to the silence that fills the space around you. Silence is never empty. It carries faint echoes, fragments of things long forgotten. In the stillness, if you allow it, you may hear something you did not expect. A voice, a breath, a whisper. The villagers of 1871 thought they had silenced Violet Mueller forever. But silence is not the end. It is the beginning. Silence is a door, and behind that door lies every secret, every unspoken truth, waiting to be heard. That is where Violet lingers, not in the grave, not in the forest, not even in the ruins of that cursed village. She lingers in the silence between your own thoughts, and perhaps that is why her story endures. Because she does not belong only to history, she belongs to us. To you. Think about it. Every one of us carries a secret. Some are small, harmless things. Others are heavier, dangerous, locked away like prisoners in the mind. We build walls around them, hoping they will never break free. But Violet's whispers remind us of a truth too frightening to ignore. Secrets are never safe. They will find a way out, and sometimes it takes only a single voice to set them loose. What if Violet was never cursed? What if she was simply cursed to reveal what others already knew but refused to admit? She did not create darkness. She illuminated it, and people hate the light when it exposes the rot. That is why they feared her. That is why they condemned her. But imagine, just imagine, that such a gift could not die. Imagine it passed from her lips into the air, woven into the very fabric of the world. Imagine her whispers traveling across time, seeking ears willing or unwilling to listen. You may laugh, call it superstition, but listen closely again. When you are alone, when the house is dark, when the night grows too quiet, have you never felt as though someone was about to speak your name? That is where she dwells. In those moments, not behind you, not in front of you, but just beside you, too close to see. The villagers thought they buried their guilt with Violet. But guilt is not soil. It does not cover. It corrodes. Their descendants lived in fear, hearing her voice in the creak of a shutter, in the rustle of trees, in the thunder that split the night sky. And as years became decades, her legend traveled far beyond that small, forgotten town. Scholars wrote of her, wanderers whispered of her, and even now, across oceans and centuries, her story has found its way to you. Ask yourself, why? Why this girl, among countless tales of superstition and folklore? Why does her name refuse to die? Because Violet Mueller represents something deeper. She is not just a figure of fear. She is the embodiment of truth itself, inescapable, unrelenting, and merciless. And truth, when spoken, cannot be burned, cannot be banished, cannot be erased. Picture her again, standing barefoot in the snow, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with sorrow. Not anger, not hatred, sorrow. She did not curse them. She pitied them, for she knew that no matter what they did to her, no matter how violently they silenced her voice, the truth would still come. It always comes, and now it comes for you. Perhaps you think your secrets are safe, buried in diaries, encrypted in messages, sealed within your own chest. But the lesson of Violet is this: the walls we build around our truths are thin. All it takes is a single whisper and everything collapses. That is why her story still grips you. Because somewhere, deep inside, you fear that you too might be exposed. That one day the thing you dread most will be spoken aloud. And if Violet could stand before you now, she would not point to others. She would not reveal their sins. She would lean close, her cold breath on your ear, and she would whisper yours. Would you beg her to stop? Would you try to silence her? Would you become the villagers of 1871, choosing rage over reflection, destruction over acceptance? Or would you listen, That is the choice Violet offers even now. Do you understand why her story is dangerous? Because it forces you to look inward. Horror is not only about ghosts and shadows. True horror is about seeing ourselves, stripped bare, with nothing left to hide. Violet was feared because she pulled away the mask. And every one of us wears one. The villagers destroyed her or tried to, but they did not destroy the truth. They only unleashed it. That is why her legend feels alive. Why even as you hear these words, you cannot shake the thought that she might be here, listening, waiting. You tell yourself it is only a story, but stories are powerful. Stories outlive flesh. Stories carry whispers. And what if this one is more than a story? Think of the coincidences in your own life. The times someone spoke words you thought no one could know. The moments when a stranger seemed to glimpse too deeply into your soul. Think of the nightmares that woke you in the dark, the ones you never told anyone about. What if those were not coincidences at all? What if they were Violet's whispers, brushing against your mind like a moth's wing, reminding you that she has not forgotten? Do you feel it now? The unease that curls in your stomach, the subtle chill in the air, the way your skin tightens as though unseen eyes are upon you? That is how her presence lingers. She does not need to be seen. She only needs to be felt. And she is patient. She waited in that village for years, revealing secret after secret until they tried to silence her. She has waited in the silence of history for over a century, her story spreading like roots through soil. And now, she waits for you. When you turn off this story, when the screen goes dark and the room grows quiet, she will still be there. The question is not whether she will whisper. The question is whether you will hear. So I ask you, if she spoke your darkest truth into the night, would you deny it? Or would you finally confess? Perhaps you think you are safe, that this is only a tale, spun to frighten you. But remember this. Every villager who dismissed her, who called her a liar, who spat at her feet, heard her words come true in the end. Every one of them. And now her words travel further than they ever could before. Across miles, across screens, across the fragile barrier between story and reality. Perhaps that is why you found this tale, why you are hearing her name tonight. Perhaps she wanted you to. Listen, can you hear it? The faintest murmur beneath my voice. The soft cadence of something slipping between the syllables. That is her. She has always been here, waiting for you to notice. And so, as this story draws to its end, know this. Violet Mueller's voice is not bound to me or to this tale. It belongs to the silence that follows. And in that silence you will discover whether you are strong enough to listen. If Violet's tale has unsettled you, if you feel her lingering presence now, then remember, this is not the end. There are more voices like hers, more whispers buried in the dark corners of history. And if you wish to hear them, to invite them closer, then stay with us. Like this story, share it, let it pass from ear to ear, from room to room. Just as Violet's whispers once passed through the walls of her village. And subscribe, if you dare. For each story carries another secret, another voice waiting to be heard. But be warned, the next whisper may not come from the past. It may come from the silence in your own room. It may come from behind you, and when it does, will you have the courage to listen?